What's up, everybody? Diamata here. Welcome to Codecast Live. And today, what we're going to do is something what we used to be called the Holy Grail layout. Now, it's probably not as difficult as it kind of was in the past. Now, with using modern technologies, and that's kind of why it adopted this name Holy Grail, because it was very difficult to achieve. But now it's actually a very easy layout to achieve. I'm actually going to use the whiteboard here to illustrate what the Holy Grail layout actually is. So the whole Holy Grail layout, I'll go over here. Let's say this is our page, just like this here. And your page would have a header, and it could be any size, okay? And then your page would have a footer, and then you would have some main content area. And sometimes the main content area would have, maybe a sidebar, which would have some navigation in it. Maybe it has another place over here, maybe for ads or something, I don't know. And then your like article would be over here. So you have maybe like a title over here, maybe you have like an image, and then it would just start doing text like this. And that's kind of what your Holy Grail Holy Grail layout would look like. You would have, again, header right here, maybe a footer like this, maybe a navigation like this, maybe you have some ads over here, and then your article. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Is we're going to be making this layout. Now you might be wondering, well, that doesn't seem so hard, but what's actually hard about this is the actual footer, and what people are looking for is for this footer to always be at the bottom of a page. That's why the footer is called the footer, is it's expected to be at the bottom. So actually pushing it to the bottom all the time, no matter what kind of content it is in here, was the thing that was the more difficult thing to do. So what we're going to do is actually achieve that today with Flexbox. We might try to do it with CSS Grid if we have the time, although I probably won't, since it's already been about a minute and change since I've been talking. So let's just go right into the code here. All right, so let me bring it up, and let's see, this one here, yep. Okay, so in order to do the Holy Grail layout, what I like to do first, excuse my laptop squeaking, what I like to do first is I would like to create a main element, okay, and this is a semantic HTML5 element, and I'm going to put in a couple of things in here. First, I'm going to have a semantic element called header, just like that, and I'm going to put in the word header just so we know that it's there. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have this thing called section, just like this. All right, and the section is going to be that middle part that we were talking about. I'm not going to put any content in there just yet. I'll put the footer, and we'll call it footer just so we know where it is, just like that. All right. So now, what you see here, I'll get rid of that thing there. Is we have a main element that's wrapping everything, and those three direct children of those things of the main is the header element, this section element, which happens to be empty, and then the footer. Okay, so we have these three things. All right, we can close the JavaScript. We won't need that. So, like I've probably shown over in the past already, I like to go ahead and put these two rules on here. I say the box sizing rule, and we say border box. And then we remove the margin on the body, so we'll reset that down to 0. Okay, those just two of those rules. All right, nothing to necessarily do with our layout exactly, but it was going to help us out in the future potentially. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to actually set the main element over here to a minimum height of 100 VH. All right, so what does this actually mean? So let's actually, instead of putting this in here, I'm going to actually remove it for a second just so we can see how big the main element is. So I'm just going to put a background on this of red. Okay, so you can see how big the main element is right now. Now, if I set the height as 400 pixels, okay, that'll always fix the height of the main element as 400 pixels. Now, we have no idea where this web page would be or website would be being shown, in what device and what orientation. So what we like to do instead is use something called Viewport Units, and that's what the VH was earlier. But what's important about that is that this is fixing the height no matter what the viewport is. So that basically means that if the content actually is, there's more content than the viewport can hold, and we only have it to, the viewport size, and in this case I'm just setting it as 400, that means if there's more content that spans farther than 400, we might have some weird overflow that we're not expecting. So instead of handling this with just height here, we're going to use something called min height instead. Okay, so now min height, you'll see that there's no real change in here. However, what will happen is if I put more content inside of the section here, or the footer, or a header, or basically any element that's in here, and I could actually force that. Let's do, let's just say that the section height, again, you wouldn't do this, but the section height is 500 pixels. Okay, so now you can see that the main element is now greater than the 400 pixels it used to be before, because the section is now much larger. Okay, and again, in this case, I didn't add any content. I could, again, add some content to increase that size, but not important. So now that I have the min height set here at 400 pixels, I actually really want to use those viewport units. So 100 VH basically means that it's a percentage of this viewport. So it's 100% of the viewport here. If I sent this to 50 VH, it's going to be half. See, it's half of the viewport. And in this particular case, again, the viewport is just our working area. It's not including the CodePen stuff right now. So our working area here is going to be this height here. VH is viewport height, so that's the height here. And it's half of that. Okay? If I set it to 25, it should be 1/4. You can see 1/4 right there. But again, we're interested in 100 VH. So the minimum height of our working area is going to be the height of the viewport. Okay? Cool. All right, so we don't need the background red. We just use the min height there, so you just have to trust me that it's still there as a min height 100 VH. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set display flex on this. All right. Now you'll notice immediately when I do that, the header and the footer end up becoming next to each other, and that's because the default direction that everything goes in for flex is row, and I want to change that in this particular case to column, because if you remember from before, we want the header to appear on the top, then the section, which we can't really see right now, and then the footer. Okay, so that's what we have here. So now that I've changed the flex direction to column, it kind of again looks like it used to. It has header, the missing or the hidden section here, or the invisible section, and then the footer. Okay, so you have header, section, footer. All right, so now what we're going to do is the little trick that's going to push that footer down. So I'm going to target the section, just like this, and I'm just going to say flex 1. Okay, boom, there it is. You can see the footer on the bottom. Okay, what is flex 1 doing? Well, this is a shorthand, and it's actually applying the flex grow, the flex shrink, and the flex basis properties all at once. If I remember correctly, that the properties are 1, or the values are 1, 1, and auto. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details about flex and all that kind of stuff, but generally speaking, when I just want something to take up the rest of the available space in the container, all I really need to do is set flex to 1, and it'll just do it. So that's what I'm doing here. So the section here, which again, I'll just go ahead and show you what the section looks like. I'll set it to blue so you can see it. So you can see the blue here is taking up the rest of available space, and the space that's available is the 100 VH here, okay? Again, if I set this to 50 VH, that's the available space. It's 50%, right? So now it's taking up the header has its own content, the footer has its own content, and the section's taking up the rest of the available space. So that's what flex 1 is doing, the rest of the available space, okay? Nice. Cool. So now, if you can kind of move forward a little bit, you could kind of tell what we have to do for the middle piece, or section here. We're going to do the exact same thing, only we're going to do it horizontally. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a nav, just like this. Nav. I'll put in an article. Article. Oh gosh. There we go. And then I'll put in an aside, which are, again, all of these are HTML elements, HTML5 elements. Okay, so you can see them in here. And just like before, what we did with our main element, the section element has direct children, the nav, the article, and the aside. And right now they're on top of each other. That's a regular block stacking. We're going to change that display property for the section, which is, again, is the parent for all this, to display flex. Okay? Now again, like I said earlier, this is going to put them all in a line, and we don't have to change this. We can change this back to normal. It's going to put them all in a line, which is actually what we want. And in this particular case, what we want is the article to take up the rest of the available space. So I'm going to go ahead and target the article, and I'm going to say flex 1. Boom. Now you can see the aside is pushed all the way over here, the nav is over here, and the article is over there. And we could again see how big our article is at this point just by saying background yellow, and you could see how much space that article is taking up. Okay? So now what I actually am interested in here is, let's say we want some padding in here to make this a little bit more nicer just as a display property. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the header to have a border on the bottom, the footer to have a border on the top. We'll have the article have a border on the left and the right, and see how that looks. So we'll do border left is 1 pixel solid EEE. Border right is 1 pixel solid EE, and then we're going to target the header with a border bottom 1 pixel solid EE, and the footer as a border top 1 pixel solid EE. Okay, well you can't really see it very well. Let's bump this up to CCC. Okay, so that darkens up a little bit. That's good. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of padding to my header and footer just to give them a little bit more beefiness. There you go. Okay, and then we could actually target everything that's a direct child of section, like this. This is the direct child, and then everything, and we'll give that stuff padding too. Cool. All right, so that's our Holy Grail layout. And again, like I said, if there was lots and lots of content in article, this would actually end up pushing the footer down, which is exactly what we want. But we want the footer to at least appear at the bottom of the page if the content doesn't really allow it, right? So again, if we didn't have the flex happening on, let's see here, the section, right, we would get that footer. Let me just make sure to cut it here. Yeah, see, the footer would appear up all the way up on top here, and we don't want that again. What we really want is we want the footer to always be at the bottom of the page, and for these areas to be as big as they need to be. Okay, and again, let's do my favorite. Let's see, it's called Hipster Ipsum. Hipsum, right? Hipsum, yeah. There we go, Hipster Ipsum, and this is my favorite content generator. We'll do this for 5 paragraphs. That looks good. And we'll just go ahead and copy all of my lorem ipsum in here. Copy. And I'm going to put in the HTML in the article section and see what happens. All right, I probably need a couple of actual paragraphs in here. Even though it's a lot of content, I actually really need paragraph tags, unfortunately. So I did not copy those. And I might consider also squeezing the size of my paragraphs just so that they make a little bit more content. And I'm doing this a little sloppily in terms of setting up my paragraphs, but again, this is just for the purposes of showing you what the content is going to do to our particular layout that we have. Okay, great. So you can actually see it a little bit already that this thing is actually pushing everything down because there's so much content. Again, actually, if I just make this ever so slightly here, as I decrease the size here, the content, of course, is getting squished. So it has to actually go down even deeper. And you can see again that because of all the content here, now my page is scrolling like this. Okay, and that's kind of what we were looking for here. All right, we were looking for this idea. Again, this is like, very wide, and you can, get everything in here. At least the footer always stays down here no matter what the content is. And then as the page grows with the amount of content that we have, it'll actually, of course, again, stay at the bottom no matter what. Okay, so that's it. I'll save that for you folks. And again, I hope that you folks enjoyed this kind of exploration of how we do a Holy Grail layout. Again, it is very much possible with CSS Grid. We didn't really have the time to do it in here. Maybe we'll do it later. Yeah, that's it. and I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining me.